In the last video I made about the environmental impact of buying games, I talked about the production of plastics, paper inserts, and discs, and how they're leaving a permanent mark on the planet by sheer existence. Production cycles of any physical media are brutal, and the games industry is no exception. In fact, up until a few years ago, a case could have been made that they were doing the most damage out of all forms of entertainment, since streaming for movies, TV, and music has been widely available for a lot longer. Even digital ownership of those have a lower barrier of entry, since the download size for games are drastically higher than those of any other medium. As technology has progressed, much to the dismay of internet service provider monopolies, internet speeds have gotten faster and more readily available across the world, meaning the digital distribution of games has become a lot more prominent. So you would assume this would be a great win for the fight against climate change, right? Well, no. Some say that digital distribution is arguably worse than physical distribution, and that's what I want to look at today. Let's go over the different ways downloading, or now that Google Stadia is for some reason a thing, streaming is negatively impacting our environment because, well, I'm not finished ruining video games for myself and everyone around me. So welcome back to the ethics of buying games. I want to put another big asterisk on this video, like I did the last time. I don't think anyone should feel guilty or stop buying games in any capacity. Hell, I bought and downloaded games just to use as footage in this video. Understanding what exactly this means as a consumer is important so that necessary changes can be made by those in power. The more people that can fight for change, the more power we have to do so. Digital distribution of games isn't exactly a new thing to the industry. In fact, games have been available online since before the market crashed in 1983. A service known as GameLine was available on the Atari 2600, which allowed customers to hook their console up to their phone line with a specialized cartridge and rent games for a few days at a time. Internet was not easily accessible back in the early 1980s, however, so obviously physical game copies dominated the era. The 90s played around with internet connectivity and digital distribution, but since home internet connections didn't become a mainstay until around 2001, they didn't gain much ground. There are a few notable exceptions like GameSpy and Battle.net, which launched with Quake 3D and Diablo respectively, providing online matchmaking servers, but they didn't become distribution platforms until much later. All of this is to say that while online purchasing and downloading has always been a part of the industry, it didn't become integral until the 2000s.
Welcome to Xbox 360.
The release of the Xbox 360 in 2005, along with their Xbox Live Arcade service, opened the floodgates to online purchasing. While Valve released Steam as a client in 2003, it wasn't the central focus of gaming platforms. Back then, games still needed to be installed through CDs using their unique keys. And it was more of a platform just to buy Valve games, not the behemoth storefront we know it as today. Over the last 15 years or so, technology has evolved so rapidly, and the need to always be online, always be updating, and always be purchasing games or in-game items has become so central to the medium that it's almost impossible to imagine the industry without it, for better or worse. Every console comes with its own digital storefront, and the war for the PC launcher of choice has become an exhausting battleground. This increased reliability has meant that companies are purchasing more and more server space to store their data on. Now you'd think more server space for distributing games, hosting online games, and maintaining cloud saves across multiple consoles and even platforms would be a good thing, and in some ways it is. It's made life incredibly convenient. If by some unfortunate happenstance your console or computer is stolen, your purchases are not lost with it. Instead, they are tied to accounts to be recovered fairly easily. But at what cost? On the surface, it's easy to make the case that physical games are more detrimental to the environment than digital. There is a tangible detriment happening to the earth through the use of non-renewable plastics and packaging, and even emissions used in transporting goods from manufacturing plants to retail stores to houses. Although they deal in high yet fairly obscured numbers, it's still easy to quantify. Digital is a lot harder to get to grips with. The cost of non-renewable energy to keep data centers, our home entertainment systems, and everything in between running is a silent killer, and a lot of the reason people are so easily shielded from the destructive nature it's having on our environment as a whole. So let's look at some numbers. In a paper written by Kieran Mayers and colleagues titled The Carbon Footprint of Games Distribution, a game of around 8.8 gigabytes has a far more negative impact on the environment in digital form than its physical counterpart, emitting around 27 kilograms of carbon as opposed to the 20 kilograms of its retail contemporary. For context, around 1.6 kilos of CO2 is emitted per half-hour showing of Netflix, or in more tangible terms, the average passenger car emits around 0.1 kilo of carbon per kilometer. 9 GB is almost nothing in 2019 in terms of data used. This year's annual installment of Call of Duty, annoyingly titled Modern Warfare, is around 170 GB with the campaign, multiplayer, and all post-launch content included. That is a fair chunk bigger than 9 GB, turning that 27 kilos of carbon into around 510 kilos per download, which is not good. These enormous sizes are becoming more and more the norm. Rockstar's PC porter Red Dead Redemption 2's file size clocks in at around 150 GB. IO Interactive's Hitman 2 clocks in at just over 100 GB, although you can download whatever mission you wish, which is nice, but despite that, all of these games aren't just outliers. They are becoming more and more the default as games get increasingly complex worlds, higher fidelity textures, and more localized voice acting. It's a hard line to walk because all of these things are great. More localization means more accessibility worldwide. Having deep and interesting worlds to explore is something consumers are always begging for, and well, who doesn't love just sitting around and looking at immaculately detailed environments? It is worth noting that although these numbers take into account electricity used by the downloader, power from the data center, and power used to create the digital file, they are all based on estimations and filling in some gaps. So they're not concrete, just a rough estimation written in 2014 based on internet speeds back then. So power consumption today may be lower. And while modern consoles can utilize a low power mode while downloading games, they are still in use and actively consuming energy to get you your games digitally. Basically take these numbers with a slight grain of salt and use them to put things into perspective rather than the hard data, because it's simply impossible to get things exact when there are too many changing variables. On top of that, however, with games as a service becoming a bigger push, that is, games that are designed to last as long as developers wish through constant updates, seasons, cosmetics, etc., the need to constantly download is ever growing. Something I am extremely guilty of myself is playing these kinds of games for a couple of weeks, uninstalling them when I've lost interest, and re-downloading them if an update piqued my curiosity. It's a hard line to toe and shockingly easy to justify when you have fast download speeds and can get Apex Legends in a matter of minutes to see what's changed. But all of this downloading and re-downloading is, well, terrible for the environment. This uses up immense amounts of power, resulting in way too many emissions being expelled into the air. Cloud-based gaming was touted as the best way to curb these carbon emissions, since it cuts out a lot of the middle pieces of the whole process, and relying on one data center rather than multiple to host and distribute a single file. Matthew Smith from Digital Trends says in his article about the impact of the Stadia that, despite being one of the biggest pushes for renewable energy among their megacorp tech peers, the Stadia takes advantage of being centered in Portland, Oregon, which is a forerunner of renewable energy. The problem with this proposal is simple: the demand of the market. This is not just an issue Google needs to face alone too. Market demand for video games, especially games as a service, is ever growing, forcing more and more companies to expand, despite their best efforts to go or remain green. The Stadia, like Netflix did for movies and TV shows, aims to increase the accessibility and ease at which people play games, which again on paper sounds amazing. A wider audience for games means the market can shift into different and more interesting experiences as a whole, but that conversation is for another day. Smith writes that video streaming is currently around 50% of all internet traffic, and projected to increase to around 80% by 2021, with a generous headcount of around 2 billion gamers worldwide. The number of people streaming games with this new system could be incredibly high. This increased demand for games instantly will mean the higher need for more data centers worldwide, putting around 20% of the world's energy consumption on data centers alone by 2025. It's not all doom and gloom, however. Companies at the top are making strides towards a cleaner and greener industry. According to the UN Environment Program posted on the 23rd of September this year, Sony intend to enact a better power saver mode to offset around 29 million tons of CO2 by 2030, as well as report their emissions to help educate the greater gaming community. Microsoft are expanding their carbon neutral plan detailed in 2012 and engaging players through initiatives like their Minecraft Build a Better World one. Twitch are teaming up with Niantic to help distribute the message to their audience about sustainable responsibility, among many other companies like Supercell, Ubisoft, and Green Man Gaming, all taking steps forward in different ways, although other major companies like Nintendo are missing from the UN Environment Program. All of this does seem like surface level engagement to save face, and it kind of is. Corporate responsibility is pretty fickle and minimal so as not to impact the bottom line as much as possible. It's pivoting the issue into the hands of the consumer, and while companies can and should be doing more, this passing the buck may be a good thing. If the gaming community at large can become more aware of their impact, maybe we can lobby at the root of the problem of this carbon footprint the gaming industry has on our planet, non-renewables. Ultimately, all this offsetting, sidestepping, and skirting around the issue can be greatly alleviated if we start using renewable energy rather than fossil fuels.